No, wait, which one are we doing first?
You said coding, so you wanted to talk about the modernization one, like AI assisted rewrites now cheaper than patching legacy systems. When to let
And we
agents
can talk.
rewrite.
That'd be part of it, but like it
Yeah.
won't be all of it because I mean, people might watch this that aren't necessarily on COBOL, right?
Universal.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Leah Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the guy who's more interested in cracking code than cracking cold ones with the boys, Rich Swire. How you doing?
When you said crack, I thought you were going a different angle, but I like it. I like it.
Yeah, no, it's our one of our first real cold days outside, and I don't know. We've been talking a lot about code lately. Cold. I don't know. This is what we get for listening to our producer give us his lightweight 5 for his stand up. I'm just going after jokes that probably don't exist.
That's
but
fine.
You know, there are some things that do exist out there, and it's the problem with people trying to modernize their code with AI or not really knowing where they're starting. So we're going to kind of keep it light today. I think dive into this topic just for those that are a little bit more technical, listen to the podcast, and talk a little bit about how maybe AI is changing this cost of modernization around some of the projects that we know we've been doing lately.
Yeah, I mean, code is obviously, we've talked about how AI can be a huge accelerator when it comes to coding. And I think everybody's kind of getting used to using AI as kind of part of their tool set. And I think that's where most of the adoption is today, right? In their integrated development environments, their CLIs and so forth. So a lot of people out there are using, GitHub Copilot or VS Code or whatever it might be, their tool of choice. And some people are using things like Cursor and other different IDEs. And where AI is kind of part of, it's kind of this kind of autocomplete on steroids, right? Where it can actually help you develop out, and you can query it and ask it to help you, finish out a routine or whatever it might be. And I think that's step one, of the kind of coding evolution that we've seen. And then recently with the development and how well, Claude and even OpenAI with Codex and a variety of other models have really advanced this idea of basically, generating code entirely.
Independently.
It's no longer like human driven, right? So I kind of equate it to the same leap that you have to take if you've ever been like in a Tesla or own a Tesla, where
the auto drive feature.
Yeah, the auto drive feature is there, and you hear about other people doing it, and you're like, and you've seen it work, but not many people are kind of diving into it and going, I trust this car is going to take me where it needs to take me. I think most people start with like, all right, I'll turn it on, but I'll still have my hands on the wheel, and then eventually they start looking down at their phone a little longer. And then maybe they get brave enough to go on a longer drive or go on the highway with it. And I think it's the same exact kind of adoption that we're seeing in coding. And then there's people that are just, who cares, YOLO, and they just go all in with the auto driving. They drive and have the Tesla drive them all the way to, Orlando on I-4, right? They don't care. And I think those people have actually kind of leaped over a lot of the IDE oriented development and gone right into kind of the code gen, kind of the vibe coding engines like you've seen out there with Google just released theirs, where you can generate an entire app. You have Lovable, you have a variety of other tools out there that are obviously in hyper growth because people are now, especially people who are not core developers, are now just getting involved in building out applications just through prompting, right? So this evolution, though, is very complicated for a software company because, it's one thing for you to be that guy at parties who talks about his app idea that you can never get off the ground because you can't find developers to build it for you. Yeah. And can go in front of like a Lovable and start generating the app. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm building something. So that's kind of a new class of developers that they're not even familiar with the idea of what it means to build software. It's almost like they're just building it, who cares, right? They don't care about QA. They don't care about, how the database looks or how to scale. They don't care about epics and stories and Kanban, and they don't care about any of this stuff. Right?
I already fell asleep, Rich.
Right, exactly. So they're just vibing, right? They're just vibe coding. And
out there vibing.
If it works, right? So it doesn't matter what the underneath looks like. So, and I think
it does take this entrepreneurial mentality that you're touching on, right? Of just like grip it and rip it. Like, get something out. It doesn't matter if it's perfect, right? And I think the market has also shifted a little bit in that, where it's not this, I have to spend 6, 8, 12 months developing an MVP to get out there. It's just like, show me what you got. If I think there's value to this, then we'll keep going down the path together. And you can do that almost instantaneously now.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the comfort level is if you were to draw like this kind of chart, you would have, how long have you been a developer, or are you like a developer? And then you have this chart of like, how fast, you can get to a prototype or in a proof of concept. And then there's this leap of faith of how do you turn that into actually production ready code. So if you're building something that you're going to use internally, or you're building something for a small group of people, then building out a prototype or that V1, it can break, it can be ugly, it can, maybe it doesn't have all the levels of security that you would hope to have. But it's, you're basically going live with something that otherwise you wouldn't go to. So it's definitely
better. Wait for a reason.
Right. When you get into like producing production ready software, or for example, when you're talking about trying to modernize legacy code or bring something into the 21st century, you're ultimately, there's a whole slew of other challenges that you have to kind of address. And so what we've seen, and I think where the gap is being filled, is you have these tools that work really, really well for generating, and either complementing or generating code that you can either review or incorporate into what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then you have this kind of incoming element of the agentic side, which what we've seen is the balance of those two things really helps, I think, accelerate what I would call your traditional developer or development cycle, still meet the requirements that you want to meet, and still leverage the speed to market that you want to achieve. That the vibe coders are getting. And how you do it is you essentially have to build out an agent that's trained on your code base, trained on your database schema, even trained on potentially your knowledge base and your
domain expertise, everything,
your Confluence and so forth. And it operates more like an Oracle agent that understands and has a 360-degree view of what you've built and what you're trying to build. And so when you actually ask it, hey, I want to rebuild this component, or if you're in Visual Basic, this form, or if you're in C++ or whatever, and I need to reimagine this object and logic around this database, it can start to regenerate that into either a more modern stack or help you debug it, or whatever it is your goal is.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between the agent that has been trained on everything that you're communicating back and forth with versus kind of what I would call the general coding model, which is trained on code. And so is this agent, by the way. They're both built on the same foundational models. Yeah. But this one serves a different purpose. It's almost like a co-pilot that's just sitting there and helping you. And you can use it for other things, right? You can use it to generate documentation. You can use it to generate spec docs for your build out. You could use it to debug and ask questions. And there is overlap. There's some things you can do as well over here with the tool-based AI, but it's definitely a different user, right? It's like over here, you're basically saying, write the code for me, and I'm writing the code and I'm asking you to complete the code. But it's only really looking at a small section of the code. It's not looking at the whole enchilada that includes the database, the documentation, and the entirety of the code that's now being put into a vector store that allows you to really kind of allow the AI to have a much more complete view, right? And this has actually helped dramatically in projects that we're involved in, where you're looking for that balance between, I don't want to just completely prompt code something and never look at, never lift up the hood, and look at the engine, because I need to understand that this can scale. I need to make sure it's what I want to build, and I want it to, be able to support it in the future. And I also maybe want to get in there and tinker and maybe make some adjustments, via my IDE. But I'm seeing the guy next to me vibe coding so fast and building out so much so quickly. I feel like I'm also missing out on that component And so I think this idea of a tool-based AI plus an agent that's trained on the entirety of what you're trying to build out, I think is really kind of this balance that we've seen occur, especially if you're trying to work off legacy code. Now, obviously, if you have no code and you're starting from scratch, then you really have nothing to. You don't really need the agent, because you would just use your general models. But I do think more people than I think, I'm guessing 90% of the development that's out there right now didn't start yesterday, right? It didn't start with Claude 4.5.
Yeah.
Certainly there's a lot of people building new stuff, prototypes and stuff like that. But for the most part, 95% of the software out there in the world has been around for 30, 40, 50 years. Some less than that, some more than that. But the bottom line is, your companies aren't just going to say, all right, guys, just throw it away, and start over. They're going to want to, they're going to want to transition what they've got, right? Because there's so much energy and effort put into that. And the logic lives there. The database lives there. They've got to upgrade their customers. It's not like they don't have the benefit of just kind of building something from user one. They've already got people using their product. So this agent plus tool approach has kind of been this best practices that we've kind of implemented to great success, where it can really kind of accelerate you in the same way that if you were building something from scratch with vibe coding.
Yeah, I think this like bridging between old and new systems, even like old ideology and kind of the newer vibe coding piece, is really where agents take center stage. Is you have these creationists, people that are probably aren't typically coders by trade, but like you said, get in the Tesla and be like, well, this feature's here, so why not, try it out and see what's happening there. And once they see it and kind of feel it, they're going, all right, well, I don't mind it taking me to the grocery store. Yeah, I know you used i4 as a reference. I don't know many people that would want to do that, but there are people that do. So you have a bunch of different camps, I think, that are overall becoming less tribal and kind of starting to create the first civilization now around code, where some of the older heads are looking at coding tools and finally realizing that it's not about rescinding complete control, as we've talked about before, but it is looking at, I know this space very well, and if I can utilize these tools to accelerate the things that keep me up at night, then there's a win there. And there's people that know nothing about coding being like, I would really wish I could finally get these ideas out of my head onto a screen somewhere and be able to visualize it. And they can do it. And they're realizing that the Venn diagram isn't as far off as it was probably 12 months ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then also, we get asked the question all the time, which is a hard one to answer, is, we'll be talking to a software company and they'll say, how quickly or how much, what if I deploy, AI and agentic workforce to help me build out my next version or modernize my code or whatever they're looking to do, how much, how does that change, my development cycle and speed? And it's always a hard question to answer, because we don't really, you have to understand their existing code base. You have to understand their processes. And I always answer that question kind of in a two-part answer. The first one is, it depends on how willing your development team is really willing to embrace and 100%. Incorporate AI into their process, because a lot of developers, especially legacy developers, are old dogs, new tricks is definitely the status quo, which is they don't want to incorporate something new. They like the way they do things, and for the most part, maybe they know how to navigate the code really well. So they have to see some benefit, right? You have to kind of attack that angle of adoption with what don't they like doing, right? Yeah. Documentation, debugging. So you start with the low-hanging fruit stuff. A lot of people try to go right into, let's have it, start coding things with our developer. And the problem there is, well, you've got to convince them that this is going to be something they can trust and use and advance.
Do you think too, and I don't want to break your train of thought, but do you think there's just a little bit of, I've been supporting the software for 20, 30 years, and I'm not going to have to do it for much longer. So like, this is going to be someone else's problem. Do you think there's a little bit of that there?
That's a scenario if you're talking about somebody who's been, is like a developer who's been, supporting software for, a couple of decades.
They know it's a slog, but it's at least the slog that they know. And
right.
Doing this modernization
much easier, familiar. Yeah. It's like, you don't pull up Google Maps in your neighborhood. I mean, if somebody said, oh, I need to walk around the neighborhood that you've lived in for 30 years, it feels
how long it's going to take.
It feels inefficient to load up Google Maps, right?
Fair, yeah. So that makes sense.
But what you don't realize is that person may be leaving tomorrow, right? So what's in the best interest of the company is to get all that knowledge of that person, which might be in his or her head. You got to get that into the AI. You got to start having the AI take over that that responsibility, or at least be
the bridge you need.
Be the smartest person in the room when it comes to your product. And the second thing that I usually answer when they ask about, what kind of impact can I expect with AI is, I always say it's not zero, and it may not be 1,000%. It may not be 10x, and it may not. I definitely not zero. It's not going to be. You're not going to be worse off with it. It's going to accelerate you in a lot of areas, guaranteed. Right? It's going to accelerate debugging. It's going to accelerate finding the issues from the support tickets. It's going to accelerate the creation of tickets into your Jira or your whatever tools that you're using. It's going to definitely help you. It's going to accelerate your code gen and help you, ultimately build out bigger and better code, especially if you're doing a modernization or if you're doing a rewrite. So whether it's going to increase it 20, 30, 50, 100% of your, accelerate, or it's going to go 10x, that's really more of that adoption cycle, but also more importantly, what you're kind of dealing with. So I think the big thing that, I think most companies are starting to realize is it's not a matter of if, just when. I'm going to incorporate AI into my development cycle. Where's the best way to insert it? Should I insert it into documentation? Yes, no, that's a no-brainer. Should I insert it into tier 2, tier 3 tickets, support tickets? Absolutely no-brainer, right? Should I insert it into QA? Yeah, sure, but that might be a little bit premature. Maybe you need to insert it into, code, basically getting into your developers' hands and making sure that they are using something that can relate to that process, interject into the process of coding. And you might have some developers that are, ready to rock and have been using AI already and can't get enough of it. And those are the ones obviously you want to really lean into. And those that are kind of the stragglers, you have to kind of convince through, some very low-hanging fruit use cases that make their life easy. And once they start to understand and experience it, then it will incorporate. But you can't expect you snap the fingers that AI just kind of interjects into your business, and suddenly your whole development team is on board. There's a lot of, like when you go online, you'll see, it feels like it's like a political issue. Like half the world says, "Oh, this vibe coding sucks. The code it generates sucks," and never use it. If you're a real developer, you end up spending more time debugging AI than you save. And I think
the same mentality as like the back in my day, right? Like
a little bit. Also I think it's partially because maybe they just don't know how to do it, right? Like they don't, it's not the same part of your brain. I think a lot of developers grew up, like if you were a developer back in my day, to your point,
there it is.
if you were a developer back in my day, there was no such thing. I didn't even know what full stack developer was until like the 2005. Like when I was developing, you were it. Like you had to know everything.
And all be all, yeah.
Yeah, there was no like, you're a back end guy. Okay, so no, you had to be everything from user experience all the way down to the database.
Yep.
And so when you're a full stack developer today, and if you've been involved in building applications, which means you've kind of either worked with and or were the architect and understand what it means to scope out and build a full application end to end, you're probably going to be in a much better situation to adapt to
take on AI
prompt coding because you're used to directing a team and you're used to putting out specs and scope documents and pulling a blueprint.
AI is just now part of that.
But if you're a developer that grew up and your job was, I'm the database guy or I'm the DevOps guy, and I don't care about all the other stuff, then you will struggle because you're going to be limited into what you can prompt. And an AI, even though you can instruct it to be, I guess, to some degree, partial developer, it kind of wants to be a full stack developer. I mean, AI is going to generate the UI, it's going to generate the database, it's going to want to generate the logic, the code, the rules. Yeah. So I think part of it is prompt engineering. Is I would say 60-70% of what I've read online about people complaining about how the AI did this or AI did that is either because they didn't really understand how to do the prompting and walk the AI through it, and or they were just using a really poor tool, or they were using an older version of a tool that just wasn't as mature. Yeah. But every day that goes by, it gets better and better and better. So I think those arguments are starting to lose a lot of steam. But I will say that at the end of the day, you have to think of this like in any implementation of AI is that it's human plus AI. It's just that AI, it's okay to let the AI drive the car and maybe keep one hand on the wheel and maybe, go check your phone. But, every once in a while, stare at the road, right? Like, trust but verify, that's, I think, the status of anything when it comes to AI, whether you're coding, whether it's customer support. I think human in a loop is, probably the best way, the most powerful statement you could kind of express in what phase we are in with AI is that there should be a human in the loop. But that doesn't mean the human is the one that's driving the car. And I think that analogy still holds true. And it may hold true for a long period of time because, we hold ourselves to a much higher standard. We can have a whole nother episode about if those standards make sense anymore, but we hold ourselves to a much higher standard that what AI can deliver. So the answer at the end of the day is human plus AI is still in play. But I definitely think the naysayers that are saying that AI can't generate products or can't generate software, I just think they're Looney Tunes. It's clearly the case where it is building, very robust, complicated applications at scale. And as long as you have a team that's on board to monitor
to supervise,
then that's how you get the leverage. Yeah.
Love it, man. Well, for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Takes the flow, Leah Rich on the mic, ready to explore.